take a ride on board the flying magic monkey machine.
Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, I'd love to introduce to you the incredible person that doesn't really need an introduction. This is Dweezil Zappa. Welcome to the Chapman Lo-Fi Podcast, intentionally lo-fi, so that we don't give people any false sense of hope. Hello, Dweezil. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Listen, I have to get the fan part of me out of the way because this is super surreal. Followed you since the mid-90s. Fell in love with your music, had no idea about your father until, I'm not kidding, 8 years later, when my dad found me listening to Lucky Jones on Shampoo Horn. And he said, "Oh, that's Frank's son." And I was like, "Who's Frank?" And then he played me all the Frank Zappa stuff.
Oh, cool.
I found you everywhere I looked in the world of guitar. You were somewhere hidden doing a thing, whether it was on a movie, whether it was on, He-Man Woman Hater. There was always somewhere that I found you just destroying guitars with technique and just feel. And so it's led me to this point now where I'm 50 and I finally get to chat to you, which is incredible. So thank you so much for being on this.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me.
I think you could probably answer a lot of my gear questions.
Whatever you're curious about, if I can help, great.
Thank you so much. Okay. You clearly have access to kind of anything that you would need in the gear world. I know that you have some incredible valve amps, some vintage stuff, some modern stuff, but you sort of strongly stuck to the digital path. I know that you use Fractal. Is that right still?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's an area that I've just taken baby steps into, having been dyed-in-the-wool tube valve, hot head amp fan my entire life. You clearly made the decision to move into digital for your own reasons. I'd love to know why.
Well, I was doing a lot of touring at the time. I started doing the project where I was playing my dad's music in 2006, and we were doing about close to 100 shows a year for 14 years in a row. And I started off with a pretty emallaborate analog multi-amp speaker cab system with lots of effects. The issue for me was that to recreate my dad's guitar sounds, it really required unique wiring of all kinds of gear and a lot of gear. And it started to become very expensive, and the stuff wasn't working because when you travel down the road, everything comes loose. So sound checks, I would be unable to get my guitar rig up and running as fast as it was needed to be put together. And there was always a ghost in the machine, some wire just slightly pulled out because, you're trying to jam stuff into small spaces to keep it lighter or more compact to travel with. And it just was not working very well. Plus, it wasn't as the routing of the audio components wasn't as flexible as I needed to be able to create a lot of the sounds and textures that my dad would have done on records. So when
I see, because he would have gone maybe through the front and then into the loop, and then you can't continually rewire pedals and
right. I mean, the thing is, he might configure how things are put together. And at one point I had a thing in my rack that was called a switchblade, which was a digital patch bay where you could reconfigure the wiring of already wired pedals. And that thing was in its early phases, and it wasn't that stable, and it wasn't very convenient or easy to program. And so it just added more problems to the whole rig. Yeah. So, there's early photos of the rig as it got to like 2 refrigerator sized racks filled with stuff. And, it sounded good, but the thing was, every time that it got set up, it sounded different as well. And, the power in the building can change how the amps respond and how they play. So when I finally got around to trying out the Fractal, I realized how much more flexible it could be, how much gear it could replace, and how consistent of a sound I could get, and how much lighter everything would be. And it worked well for what I needed it to do. And of course, I've the rig that I have made has expanded and contracted over the years. It's become a large format rig that's based on fractals with lots of pedals. And then I've made it smaller a few different times. It's evolved many times as the technology has evolved. I used to have to use 2 fractals, one for the left side and one for the right side, because even though it's a stereo unit, I was running out of DSP with the processing power required to make the kind of presets that I needed to make to build the sounds. Right. So it was elaborate for that reason, where you basically are having autonomous left and right, and you have signal chains, things that only go to one side and only go to the other, and then some stuff that goes to both. So that became kind of one of the things that I did stick with over a period of time. I do have a touring rig that is currently set up that way, because I do find that it makes it easier for me to get some of the sounds that my dad would have used on a record. It just gives me the flexibility to do that. But now I can do it with a single axe effects because it's powerful enough, so the Axe 3 is powerful enough to do it. And at the end of the day, the sound and the feel of the tones that I can create on that, when you listen to a finished record or a mix of a live show, the guitar sounds as it should. It doesn't sound like, oh, that's a completely fake processed sound. And a lot of the authenticity of the sound has to come from the right speaker impulse response. And I usually make those myself so that I can know what I'm looking for. And that's a big part of building the sound from the ground up. If you have the right speaker cab simulation, you don't have to do as much with the actual amplifiers to get the right tone. But I've done so many experiments with all of that stuff, and I've definitely found some things even recently that I had never tried before that really actually do make a huge impact on the authenticity of the sound and the way the guitar feels when you play it.
Well, this is absolutely amazing. I mean, you're answering questions that I've had without, there's a sixth sense thing going on here. I was going to ask you, but you've kind of delved into this already. I mean, clearly your situation is utterly unique. I mean, you need to make so many different kinds of sound and have them historically correct, because the Zappa fans are unhinged, and they'll, you must get some crazy commentary like, oh, well, I think the fuzz actually that he used was probably this and that. So you got to get it nuts on.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that have speculation of things. And the thing at this point in time is you don't have to use the actual equipment that was used to make the sound. There's enough stuff out there that makes a similar enough sound. And if you know how to put it all together, you can use stuff to make an almost identical copy of a sound using gear that player never used, right. So Van Halen sound or Frank Zappa sound or whatever. But the thing is, it's really about trying to make sure that when you play it, it feels right and it's an inspiring sound. And a lot of the stuff that I like about the way the Fractal can work is that there are certain sounds that you can create that are multi-layered and textural, so that when you play it, you're actually reacting to the sound as it kind of blooms differently in the left and right. And so we use in-ears, and I can hear all that stuff. But even with the speakers on stage, I have 4 speakers on stage because the setup that I have is intended to be different for any preset. So I might have a mono center channel and a wide left and right, or I might have 2 stereo sounds, but they're panned slightly differently based on, let's say I have a clean DI sound that's mixed in and I have other effects. I can go ahead and create those layers to be just the right level, and also use different pedals, expression pedals, to rebalance things as I need to. So I can do all kinds of things where I can have a sound that feels like it's alive and I'm reacting to it. And that's kind of what I love about it, particularly the Dynaflanger sound that my dad created for Shut Up and Play Your Guitar, because it's so heavily modulated, but against one side that's stable. So when you have a sound that's like going in and out of tune against a stable side, you get these things that are happening in the stereo field that are really fun and interesting, that make you play a certain way, especially at moments in a solo. So it's kind of like, you know, something's cooking on the stove and it's about to boil over. You know, you have these things that are going on and you just have to react to it.
So it sounds like it was a really practical solution for what you needed. And then you managed to get it to sound for you good enough that you were happy to do it. And it, you know, it fulfilled the practical side. And then from a sound point of view, you could get it really good. Does that mean that when you're recording now, you would tend to use the Fractal rather than mic up a bunch of amps?
Well, the thing is, I haven't done any recording because I haven't had time. I have a studio, and I'm doing a lot of things in the studio right now for my YouTube channel. And a lot of what I'm doing at the moment is actually testing amplifiers. So I'm currently in the middle of making a video series on the Sundragon line of amplifiers, and I'm playing all 3 of the amps in the Jimmy Page Sundragon line. They have a new one called the Nymph, which is a 1-watt amp, and it's got an 8-inch speaker, and it's my favorite of the 3.
Wow.
Because it has so many cool options for recording, and especially when you get into small amplifiers, what people tend to not realize is that, let's say you have a small speaker, like an 8-inch speaker, you put a large diaphragm microphone on that, you're capturing more real estate of the speaker and how it's reacting and what it's giving you in terms of a sound profile than just the 57, you know? And so also, because it's not as loud as a louder amp, you can use more of your mic pre to get the character of that piece of equipment. And then you can use more of the room sound, and you can use different miking techniques because the amp is reacting in the space very differently than a very, very loud amp, you know? So the loudest amp in the Sundragon series is a 100-watt Marshall style amp, but you put a dB meter on it and it's 127 dB full up. You know, so that it's a massively powerful amp with tons of headroom, but it doesn't have all the gain that you would want. The little amp has more gain.
Yeah.
But if you were going to play in a room with that massive loud sound and you mic it up versus the 1-watt amp, which can also run at a 1/4 watt, which is even quieter. Wow. The difference between the tone and what you can sculpt is drastically different. And the big amp, even though in the room it's way louder, it sounds smaller than the small amp mic'd up and, you know, with the gain and all the character of the sound that you can get using other equipment and the sound of it in the room. It's just a different thing. So
is that because there's a lot more compression from the volume hitting the mic?
Well, the mic doesn't really care about the volume at a certain point, and it's really about the ability to define the sound. if it's so loud and you can't be in front of it to really hear what else it's doing or how it's interacting, you don't have enough of an ability to sculpt that sound any further. You're just basically putting
I get it.
Try to get out of the way.
Yeah.
But if you get this really quiet amp, you can mess with it and dial in stuff where you don't have to use EQ and other stuff. You just get the character of what this thing is. So when you listen to the early records where Jimmy used the smaller amp, that Supra, which they do have a faithful recreation of, that's the middle amplifier. They have small, middle, and the big one. All of those tones are recreatable with that amp, but the littlest one goes even further. You have things that he never had in this one. So I feel like, this is a good example of when you're in the studio and you have the ability to mess around and move mics around and try different mics and different stuff. That's a whole other world of creativity that will, if you allow it, it will influence and inspire your playing in a certain way. So to me, given the opportunity to do a recording from the ground up, I would choose probably to use different amplifiers and different miking techniques and things to try to get some fun and interesting sounds. And then if I had to play it live, I could try to recreate that in the Fractal, because it would be easier to do that than it would be to try to use the equipment to make the sound. So it's a combination of things. And, a lot of people will say, oh, well, I can always tell the difference between a tube amp and a Fractal or whatever. You might be able to when you're in close proximity to it, but at the end of the day, in a recording, it becomes much harder to tell what's what. And it will just continue to get better and better in that way. So, for example, I did a thing recently where I played Eruption for a 4th of July celebration, and I played it outside in the street. That's the Fractal. It sounds pretty close to the sound of Eruption.
It was frankly unbelievable. And I have to say, I think, maybe aside from his son, I think you do the best version of that. It's unreal, man. I mean, it's like putting the album on. You've got all the nuance there. I
try,
You do good. You do good. Well, look, I mean, if Dweezil Zappa says that digital's the way to go, then probably that's what I'm going to do. You alluded to
exploring, because there's really cool technology and it's only getting better. And then the whole other world of it, with like IK Multimedia, they have some stuff that's really cool, where they have pedals that have only certain sounds within them. So a collection just within a pedal that sounds pretty good and feels good from the get-go, but that stuff is going to keep getting better too. Sure. So I feel like at a certain point, the feeling of playing it and hearing it in real time will be such that you really don't miss one or the other. It's the convenience of having the small form and the reliability of it sounding the same all the time is good.
I think my problem, just to be honest, is that my upbringing as a guitar player that recorded, I went from just being in little pub bands on the pub circuit in the UK to being thrown into Abbey Road with Eddie Kramer. We became friends, and he took me under his wing and taught me how to record. And so I kind of felt like I owed a debt to the old school way of, miking up the back and the front and pull it off a little bit and get some of the room. And I want to maintain the way that feels. And I didn't think that digital could get the feeling that I'm so used to. But you just alluded to some things you had recently found that made it feel better. What are they?
Well, there's a couple things, but also, you're talking about mic in the back and the front. You can actually make speaker IRs that are from the back, and then you can
I never thought of that.
Yeah, and then you can actually get a little bit of that, because for people who've never had the opportunity to do what you're talking about, mic the amp from behind and from the front, there's a certain depth to the sound, and if done correctly, where it sits in the mix, you really get a three-dimensional sound out of it, and it's nice. But you obviously have phase problems because you have to correct that, and when I was doing the Jimmy Page demonstration thing that I was talking about, I do have a mic from behind. I have oddball placements to just show, like, if it was back in the day, early, let's say, mid to late 60s, early 70s, still the go-to factor of getting a different sound would be change the instrument or change the mic placement. You basically went to those things before you tried EQ or other stuff, because it was really about trying to get the sound at the source and the foundation of it. So I still take that approach when I'm building stuff in the Fractal. I really build all of my stuff from the ground up. And one of the things that I found, at least in the Fractal, and I don't know how this translates to other things, because I don't know the other formats as well. But, in terms of programming in the Fractal, one of the things you can do is there's a certain point where there's an EQ that's before the amplifier.
Yeah.
And so if you find a certain resonant frequency that's in a sound that you like, so for example, what you could do is you could examine a recorded sound. You could look at it on a scope and see, it's got a bump at say 500. And you could say, oh, well, where else does it have a bump, or where else does it have a cut? What's the thing that's giving it the real personality of that sound? You find what that frequency range is, and let's say it's 500, and you push that into the amp before anything else. Now, the response of what you play is going to already be closer to the sound that you like and the way the guitar reacts within that sound, because it's living in that relative
wow, that's
the
really
promoted frequency. So that ends up being an important factor in getting the response that you want, and it surprisingly does a lot of the work before you have to do anything else. So that, and then really, like, doing any kind of analysis on a guitar sound that you really like, seeing where things are cut, where they're boosted. You can then tweak the EQ of whatever you're doing with a parametric EQ in the program or whatever. And then, of course, if you have the right speaker IR to begin with, you're already kind of in the place that you need to be, and you make some slight alterations with some EQ that are beneficial to the sound. So, like, if you listen to that eruption that we were just talking about, that is the most recent little foray into working on that sound, and it felt the most like what it sounds like on the record, but like the guitar responded really well, and I could hit some of the same harmonics and get some of the same nuances within the playing, because it really matched what that sound, all the nuances of that sound, it matched it so well that actually playing it was easier, because the guitar was just reacting the way that it should with the sound.
I mean, you're definitely a guy who's read the manual, and I think a lot of my fear is the week, that 1 week of a lot of coffee, sit down with a big book and try and get through how to move stuff around and which mic. And
it's surprisingly easier with the, at least with Fractal, with their editor that they have, that you can use on a laptop or an iPad. It's not that difficult to get into, but the thing is, there's so many things that you can attach modifiers to change parameters and use a pedal for it, or have something else interact with it. So there's there's all kinds of stuff that you could do that you couldn't do in the real world because you don't have some ability to turn the knob on an amplifier in the way that this can automatically do it for you.
Yeah.
So you can do lots of weird things. Plus it has the ability to, you could rebias the amp, the digital rebiasing, or change the tubes in the amp, and you can hear all these different things. And all that stuff just comes down to how do you want to process the top end frequencies, like, you know, the fizzy stuff.
The 3K, the 4, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways where that stuff can be affected rather than just shelving the EQ off.
Yeah.
You know? So
yeah. I'm afraid of that. I know I've taken my first steps in. I got a Helix Stomp XL. I got a new X Trident. I got all these new digi things to try them all out. And because I have a little bit of touring coming up, and my touring predominantly has been Southeast Asia. And so the last thing I wanted to do was ask for amplifiers and have all sorts of problems traveling from Shanghai all the way down. And the new X stuff I used was just, I mean, it was great. I was really almost pissed off at how well it sounded, you know, back in the day with my little Digitech RP1 trying to get something out of it, you know, it was just awful. Yeah. The world has changed. I mean, since I've been demonstrating gear with Andertons over 15 years now, people are now packing it into guitars, which I think is frankly terrifying, but kind of exciting as well. It's really surprising how much better a lot of these things have gotten. Even like those Spark amplifiers. I use one of those as a practice amp in my dressing room, but it's if I'm going to just sit and practice at home, it's probably the easiest go-to thing. It's portable, it sounds good, and I just I find that it's totally fine. You know, it's not analog in any way, shape, or form, but it has familiar sounds that feel good to play on. And you know, there's a lot of people that will just always want to put their foot down and be the cork sniffer and say, oh, well, absolutely, I can always tell, and I'm never gonna, you know. It's like, well, great, enjoy playing the tube amps. They sound great. You know, no one says you can't play them, but sometimes there's you know, some convenience that you have to take into consideration, and these things have gotten good enough that you know, now is the time to look at which ones work for you. I don't suppose well, maybe you can remember, but you wrote a track that I loved when I was in my sort of teen years. It was called "Obviously Influenced by the Devil." Do you remember what amp and guitar that was, or do you have?
That was the Steinberger with the Trans-Tram, and it had the EMG pickup in it, and it was a Mesa Boogie amp that was remember they had
Studio Point 2.
Remember they had the half stack cabs, the 212s.
Yes.
And then there was like the little head that fit on top of those. Yeah. I used to have two of those, you know, so like the one cab on one side and, you know, each with a head on it.
Right.
But I can't remember the name of that one, but it had a graphic EQ and it had a push pull for extra gain.
I think it was a Studio Point 2 or a Studio Point something. I had the combo version, and mine burst into flames. So you had better than I did. But I always want, because it's so crispy cream. It's got that thick attack, but it kind of sings too. I was always curious to know what it was.
Yeah, and that record is much brighter than the sound was in the room, you know. So it's funny. I was considering doing now that I have a studio, I was considering doing a remix of that whole record and just doing a reinterpretation. Yeah.
I'll get one. I would very much enjoy that. That would be super cool. So we've talked about amps and, covered sort of the digital world of things. And I want to talk about your new guitar in a bit. But before we do, you've obviously, I think you've written some incredible music.
Oh, thanks.
And you've had to learn a lot of, it's so hard. I've been with Mike Keneally while he's played through Black Page, and I'm like, I'm watching you do it. I don't know how you fucking do any of that shit.
Yeah.
You must have worked out such a good way of practicing. And what I'd love to know is, how do you practice the music that you need to play live? Are you in ears in a preamp, desktop computer, everything's running into the in ears and you've got everything there?
No, when I have to sit and practice and play for hours, and sometimes, like if it's the Black Page or some really hard thing that was never meant to be played on the guitar, and you have to work on certain techniques that make it playable, I might play the same section. I always take the hardest part and I work on that the most, because that's going to be the thing that's going to give me the hardest time.
Right.
So I don't necessarily learn the songs in a linear fashion. I will sometimes just go only work on the hard stuff of certain things, so that I can build the technique that's required for those things. But I might play that stuff over and over for hours, for weeks on end. So I might be only learning less than 5 seconds of music, but I'll be spending hours and hours and hours on it. So when I was playing Inca Roads, and it has those groups of 7 that at some point are played double time, that was something I would have to practice. Probably when I first started learning, I would play it probably 6 or 7 hours a day. And then it was months of doing that. But then while on tour, I would have to play that probably at least 3 hours a day before the show. And then even before I had to play that hard part in the song, there's a keyboard solo that's coming to a close. And I would just have my volume down, and on stage, I would be playing the hard part, getting ready to play it, knowing that it's coming right out of the keyboard solo. Because I'd have to be able to be like, all right, I got to play this thing and try to make sure that I can get through it without falling off. Because if you miss a note and you fall off, you're gone. There's no way to go on the train. So it's not something that was ever just dialed in and I could just play it, anytime. There's very little like that when it comes to the hard stuff that I could just execute at will. Even having played it thousands of times, or tens of thousands of times at this point, it just does not stay there, because it's just so hard.
Have you ever covered Return of the Hunchback Duke?
Well, there's we've done Duke of Prunes, and there's like two different versions that we've done. We've done the one with the vocals, and we've done the live one that he had that really cool feedback guitar solo. So we've done those, but there's so many things. I mean, what I'm working on right now in my studio is going through a lot of the filmed performances that we've done over the years. So we have a ton of stuff that's never been seen, that runs through all kinds of eras of my dad's music. So I probably, let's say you film a few shows from each tour. The tour might have some songs that are repeat songs from, the last tour, because there's always going to be people that want to hear Zombie Wolf or Inca Roads, so you might have certain songs that are fixtures within the set list, but then you have a bunch of other stuff that hasn't been played before. So if I look at that as over the years of how many things we've done, there's probably about 150 or 160 songs that are not repeat songs. So I have a lot of those, but then I have a lot of versions of the repeat songs that I'm talking about, where you might have every show that we've filmed might have a version of Cosmic Debris, or it'll have a Zombie Wolf, or one of these other, staple. Yeah. But, when you consider that there's that many songs and no one's ever seen this stuff, and now, we're going to be putting it together so that there's nicely edited versions of this stuff and well mixed audio, there's going to be a huge amount of stuff that covers the 14 years that I played all this music.
Dweezil, you've been around guitar playing ever since you were tiny. I mean, obviously with your dad.
Yeah.
But you've also been exposed to, arguably the best rock guitar players on the planet. And I'm sure there are moments in your life where you can remember, I know I can, certain lessons that just stuck and echoed forever. And you were like, I'm never going to forget that. Can you remember a few things that maybe you learned from some of the cool people that would come and hang out and teach you stuff?
Well, of course, the first thing that comes to mind with that is that when Edward Van Halen came over, and the very first thing he did when he plugged in a guitar, every guitar player has a thing that they do when they test a guitar. But, having never heard him play live in front of me before, and he plugs it in, he did this one thing where he did an open string lick that started on the G string, D string, A string, and it was the 7th fret to the 9th fret to the 5th fret to open string. And then that pattern continued. So G string that way, D string, A string. And when I saw that, I was like, wait a minute, you can use open strings like that? And I heard what he did, and it was so cool. But that's kind of one of the things that is in Spanish Fly. It's, one of the shapes that he uses. And so it immediately made me see the guitar in a way that I never would have. But also at that time, there was no internet, there was no MTV. So you would have to really take a picture in your mind of this kind of stuff when you saw it. And how he made his way up and down the neck, and what it looked like, where his fingers were when he played stuff. Because I asked him to play Eruption and Mean Street and all these things. So when I saw how he did it, I could see where it was on the guitar, and then I could try to figure out how to play the parts based on my memory of where his fingers were.
That's incredible, man. I remember getting a bus to the library to get a book to learn chords, because I was born in 75. So there, phones and the internet didn't exist until I was in my early 20s. I don't know when you were born, but probably a similar situation for you,
69. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we're both super young,
and
incredibly attractive.
Yes. Incredibly.
So Eddie would just pop over and teach you stuff. I can't. That's just.
Well, he did end up just coming over one time out of the blue. The story has been told a few times by now, but he called the house, and my dad ended up talking to him, and then he came over, and it was like a superhero coming to your house. It was like he was in the same outfit from Women and Children First, and he had the Helen necklace and the whole thing. So it was just the coolest thing as a kid. There's nothing in my life that would be cooler than that. Like, there's nobody else that I would meet at this stage in my life that would be such an innovator for a thing that I would go, wow, this is so cool to see this person do what they do up close. It's just, so that was a pivotal thing.
What about people like Vi, Betancourt? I'm presuming that you were around Steve a fair bit.
He used to play in my dad's band, and I loved watching him play all the hard parts in my dad's songs, whether it's something like, the Black Page, or the bit in Montana, or other things where it was never meant to be played on the guitar, but then you see it played on the guitar and you think, oh, I'd love to learn that one day. As a kid, I always wanted to learn that stuff, but I knew it was too hard because you have to understand a lot more than just standard pentatonic guitar stuff. But being around other players, when I worked with Nuno on the Confessions record, we had a lot of similar interests as guitar players. So we did a lot of similar stuff, but it was fun to see the different approach and what people did. So even Steve's playing as he went on outside of my dad's music, all the two-hand stuff, at a certain point, I used to do a lot of tapping. I almost do none of it now. It just became something that, although I like the sound of it, I grew to like some things that are maybe more conventional in a way. So like a guy like Jeff Beck with the slide style voicing and some of that traditional style phrasing became more interesting to me over time because it lands musically very differently than doing a whole bunch of tapping. Now I still can be impressed by people that can do all that stuff, but do I want to listen to it as much as something that's more lyrical or based in a emotional context? So that's the thing, is like I have a lot of technique in my playing, but my biggest thing, if I'm going to be critical about my own playing, is there's so many ideas that I have. I can't filter them fast enough. So when I play, sometimes it's more like a run-on sentence. I like to hear players that can play in a way that can still be a very surprising ability to play something and make it different every time they do it. But still also have it feel like it's well edited to the point of being a good arrangement of something. So what I'm talking about is like, you can have a guy like Julian Lage, who is an amazing improv player and plays beautiful passages that are completely improvised. And he could play the song again 2 minutes later and play it totally differently, because he's got such a wide vocabulary and he's got this ability to just be very musical in his phrasing. And there's really only a handful of guitar players that do that very well. And in the world of rock guitar, nobody has that kind of vocabulary in terms of being able to spontaneously create stuff and make it different and feel like it has always fit there. My dad had an incredible vocabulary as a guitarist, but he was way more of a, iconoclastic approach to everything that he did. So it's a little bit different. His vocabulary from a composer standpoint and a guitar player with weird technique, he's in a category. It's a one of one, so it's, what I'm talking about though, is like, I'd like to see how to get closer to what some people can do in, I would hesitate to say in the jazz world as far as improv, but in a more like rock influenced, pop influenced way to make stuff really lyrically sit well, but also include technique. That's the hardest part, is like, how do you balance the technique with the musicality? And there's only a very small handful of people that seem to be maybe focusing in that area. There was another guy, Michael Lee Firkins, who was very good technique-wise, beautiful melodic playing, but also had that kind of Jeff Beck vibrato bar stuff happening. So, I just think that there's a thing about it right now where I love technical stuff, but I'm less inclined to want to listen to it. But if somebody can use it in a way that's also exciting musically, compositionally, and in an improvisational way, that would be very fun to listen to.
Well, I suppose from your point of view, I mean, you're an incredibly, you have such an ability at technique. It's mad to me. So when you've got to a point where technique isn't like, wow, look at the technique. Of course, you're searching for music, which is the thing. I mean, I'd love to know what you are seeing when you play guitar. Are you navigating through 7 scale shapes, each of them representing a mode?
The thing about the way that I see the guitar, I've explained it to people before, and it's funny because they're like, wow, I never looked at it that way. And when they do understand the way that I'm looking at it, they see it as being a very convenient way to make stuff easier to maneuver. So I look at it as 3 sets of 2 strings. Now there's subsets we could get into, but if you look at 3 sets of 2 strings, that means everything you could play on one set of strings is identical to the next set of strings, but it's divided by the octave. So it makes it so that you have less things for you to have to memorize for what your fingers do. So for example, there's only 5 shapes in the pentatonic scale that you would ever be playing. And if you learn those 5 shapes and you know where they are on one set of strings, they're identical on the next set of strings and the next set of strings, except that they're divided by the octave. So you wouldn't be able to just go linear up and down. You have to be like, okay, here's the first octave, here's the second octave, here's the third octave. But if you're doing just a symmetrical shape, this to this, and it moves, your brain starts to go, oh, these are just fragments of the same thing. And you can put your fingers in new positions, and it makes it easier. And when you realize that any scale that you're ever going to play is already going to have those 5 shapes in it, plus 1 or 2 other different things where you might have a half step here, or possibly, you almost never have anything bigger than a minor third stretch for most scale things. It's going to be a half step, a whole step, or a minor third, and all that exists. And if you're able to see it that way, you start seeing the neck diagonally and across the strings. And once you start to know where the unison notes are, that also helps. Like knowing your unisons and your octaves is probably the key to maneuvering the neck.
I'm just on a personal. I'm loving getting a guitar lesson from Dweezil Zappa. On a 15-year-old Rob Chapman would be shitting himself right now. This is absolutely mad. I'm really encouraged because what you're describing is similar to what I see. But I have a question: Are you tuning standard or fourths?
Standard.
Because I'm the same, seeing the shapes and I'm seeing intervals, but then the tuning skip throws it for me.
You mean between the B string and the G string? Yeah. So, but that one is, as long as you know that it has to shift, it can't be symmetrical on those string sets right there. That's where I would say, that the subsets of strings would be the B string and the G string, and then you have the B string and the A string. The D string and the A string are going to act the same as the other sets of strings. It's only the shift that you have on the B string and the G string where something, the B string always is a half step higher than what the G string is going to be. So
that's interesting. It's interesting to me that you never, or as far as I know, never considered moving to fourths. I mean, I'm not playing in fourths, but the mindset of these very few, there's only, effectively 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 shapes that on a string. Right. And then it's the same if it's in fourths. I toyed with that when I discovered that you could tune it that way, but I was thinking, because of the way you were approaching it, visualizing it that way, that you might have been tempted to do that.
Well, I know Tom Quayle does that.
That's why I was thinking about it.
Yeah. But I was already entrenched in the way that I've been seeing it for years. I didn't necessarily see a reason to have to move to that. It would have kind of made chords get confusing for me. Like I don't really adjust well to open tunings and other things. I will play in them, but I won't be able to see the neck at all the same way. I see them in limited areas that I get familiar with,
Right, I see. Yeah. The vision is gone because you spent so long, and I understand the chord thing, because that's the reason I didn't tune to fourths. I remember Tom going, just tune it all fourths, and everything is just symmetrical. And then I went to play a D chord and went, oh, wait a minute. If I can't just rock out on a D or an A, it's going to be super strange. So look, you obviously you've been massively influenced by your dad and by some incredible guitar players, but I'm interested in your non-guitar playing musical influences.
Well, I like all kinds of different music, so from folk music to classical music to whatever. I'm kind of if somebody's good at what they do and it's in any category of music, I'll be interested in it, but it has to be something that I recognize as, oh, that person put the time in and they're doing something cool and their voice is actually coming through in what they're doing. So I can appreciate that in whatever style of music it is. And I think most people can, because music is universal in that way. You can hear something you've never heard before and become an instant fan of something because music is just cool that way. But I feel like some of the things I try to incorporate in my playing that become interesting to me are coming from things that are not traditional. So like I like Indian music and Arabic music, and I like to try to put some of the bending or sliding or microtonal things in so that I can still play a bluesy thing. But I look at it more like if you have an accent and you're speaking to somebody, people can still understand you, right? But they know that you're coming from somewhere else. So if I'm playing a bluesy guitar solo and I put some Indian bends in it, it's like, oh, well, like we're still speaking the same language, but you've got a twist on it. It's that kind of thing. It's like with an accent. So that's kind of how I look at some of these things, but it does require getting some different techniques under your fingers to do some of the weirdo slidey things that I like to try to do these days. But one example would be like, if you picked up your guitar and you put your finger on the G string at the 7th fret, and then you said, all right, I need to replace my 3rd finger with my 1st finger from the 5th fret to the 7th fret, you would just slide and you would just keep like this game of like, let me replace my 3rd finger with my 1st finger. And anything that you do, any combination of notes, now move that idea around the neck, keep replacing that one finger with the other, and you slide and you create new sounds from doing this finger replacement exercise. And it's a cool sound that you can start to incorporate in all kinds of different places. But I also like to bend from the wrong note into the right note.
Why not?
Because that's an interesting sound to me. And so what that does too is it allows you to start being more adventurous, because if you purposely start in a place that is wrong and then you find the right note, you're using your ear to tell you when it's right. And now if you ever find yourself in a place where you landed on a note that you don't like, you're only ever a half step away from a note that would be a chord tone or a resolution that the audience would go, oh, okay, I understand what's happening.
Yeah. I've got a question I've asked a couple of other guests. It might be like a regular question for people like you who are incredibly prowess musicians. I asked this of the drummer from Steel Panther, and he had a fantastic answer. If you were to build a supergroup now for a show next month, comprising only of musicians that are currently alive, who would they be, and what would you call the band?
Oh, that's tough. I don't know. Well, just for like fun factor, Vinny Colaiuta would be a great drummer.
Okay.
But it'd be hilarious is to have two drummers, Alex Van Halen and Vinny Colaiuta,
That's a great idea.
see what would happen there. Because both of them have unique styles, but Alex just has such a recognizable tone in his playing. And I would love to hear him go off against the rhythms that Vinny might do. And then to keep that form factor where it's like, okay, let these guys do something sophisticated. We got to now like do what Van Halen was so good at, is like now you have to have a tight rhythm section in terms of like the bass doesn't go too far in any direction. That has to be the foundation that keeps the simple stuff for the average listener while the other stuff goes on. So, we could probably get Michael Anthony as the bass player for that. I still think that would work. But then if I'm going to have like extra guitars, I would like to have a guy like Julian Lage, just because he is so musical. But then when he's playing more in the cleaner area, I could fill in some spaces with the dirtier stuff. But if you're talking about like me being in the band,
Of course.
that would be a thing. And then, I mean, I never used to like to have keyboards in a band before because, I just like the sound of the rock stuff, but I love the keyboards in my dad's music. So, of course you were saying that people have to be alive, but George Duke was like the best with keyboards,
Yeah.
the feel and the whole thing. So I don't know anybody that would really play as well as him with that kind of thing. But
Who would be singing?
so that's tough because there's a lot of great classic singers, Paul Rogers, amazing rock voice, but you'd want somebody that could cover bluesy, soulful stuff, but has that dynamic range. So I don't know if there's a modern singer that there's a couple good singers out there. Like I think the guy in Rival Sons is a great singer. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
I like the sound of his voice, but Chris Cornell had a great voice.
That's my vocal god. If I could have had anyone's vocal cords for a day, it would have been Chris. Yeah. Have you heard Dino Jalusic?
I don't know who that is.
So I'd love you to go check him out. He's a phenomenal guitar player.
Okay.
And an unbelievable vocalist. He was singing for Whitesnake and a whole bunch of other bands. He's ridiculously skilled.
I'll have to check him out.
Yeah, Dino Jalusic. And if he's not available, I'll sing for you.
Okay, perfect.
So,
it's like it's tough to know what anything would be with that. It's like covering the rock area, but then some other spaces that are just melodic and interesting. It's a challenge to like come up with a genre of music that gives you the ability to use technical skill, but then orchestrate it in a way where you still want to listen to it. And I think my dad did a great job with that, with his own music. And recently I had played with the Metropole Orchestra, and we played some of my music and some of my dad's music, and orchestrating my own music to be orchestral was an interesting experience. And I did write one piece that was purposely orchestral, written for the orchestra. But we did take like Electric Hoedown, and we took a look at that and made that into an orchestral piece, and that was pretty fun. But the idea of being able to have that incorporated into it all. Like I would have the Metropole Orchestra as also part of the whole thing.
That's such a cheat card. You can't, and I have a whole orchestra as well.
Yeah.
That's the Zappa way of thinking. You out of the box and into the sky. Looking down at the box. That's amazing. Do you ever struggle?
I don't know what to call it though. By the way.
Well, I've got some suggestions.
Yeah.
I in my spare time, I have a real identity crisis. I was going to talk to you about this. Because I'm playing a bass, sing, play guitar, signed, tour, that kind of stuff. Own a guitar company, do the YouTube thing. I don't know what the fuck I am. I have no idea. So I struggle. And then in my spare time, I write band names.
Oh, good.
I have lists and lists of band names, like 1,000 Crows. Surprise, you're dead. Super Tasty Rooster. You can't have Rocktopus. I gave that one to Styx, Zedinia.
Nice.
But I really love, what was it? Oh, yeah. Sunshine and Silhouette. I think that's a good one. It sounds like a buddy cop movie, though.
Yeah.
So if anyone you know needs a band name, I've got a list. It's about 15 band names long right now.
Cool. Yeah. I guess I would only ever come up with like terrible band names. Like I thought a really good name for a band that plays really bad music would be Fork, and they could have albums like Fork in the Road, and they always just have like it's a giant fork stabbing something.
It's like a step up from Prong.
Yeah,
that's a good idea. I got one called Battle Snake. I thought that was super dense.
Yeah,
there's a lot of immediate visual iconography from Battle Snake. Do you ever get stuck in sort of musical identity? Because I mean, you can play so many styles. The music that you reinterpret from your father is like genre agnostic. Do you ever kind of sometimes think, what the hell is Dweezil Zappa? What do I do? I don't put a lot of time into that. Like a lot of the stuff that I like is just, I feel like life is just a constant series of pursuits. You learn something from everything, and you keep repeating the things you do like. And some people keep repeating the same mistakes, which I try not to do. But the thing is, if you only have a certain amount of time on this planet, you might as well just enjoy the things that you like and learn new skills and try to incorporate that into whatever you do. So if you listen to my music from record to record, none of them sound the same. It's always different, songwriting or textures or whatever. So I feel like it's a constant reinvention, because I just have shifting tastes in whatever it is that I'm doing. And I think that's a reflection in a lot of the stuff that I do, even like the YouTube stuff that I do. There's lots of different things that people will see me get involved in on my channel, but it's always coming from a genuine enthusiasm about that thing, so I'm not typically doing exactly the same thing over and over, and I might take several looks at one thing, like having done it one way, like, but what if we do it this way? It's always a question of what if, you know? Something that's flown through everything that you've ever done is a sense of fun and humor that I love. And I've really took it on board and sort of tried to incorporate it in my music and my creative output. Ever since Z, I fell in love with that album so hard, man. I mean, it hit me in all the right places, and I tried to learn all the songs. And then when I found some of the stuff you'd recorded on the same album as Sugar Googa Gunga, and that's where I went, wait a minute. I don't think he's picking everything down, because at the time I was just, Metallica, Slayer, just down picking everything. And then
I could never do that really fast down picking stuff. I don't understand how that's even possible, but I see people do it and I'm amazed.
It's that you got to have the right sexual preferences and the right sort of twitch muscle fibers or something. But when you are reinterpreting, I'm going to get into a picking question because I have to, because I'm a guitar player and I'm obsessed with this technique stuff. When you are reinterpreting licks, phrases that are not guitar born, and there are going to be notes that fall in weird, unorthodox places. Are you strictly alternate, or are you economy or hybrid? What? How do you get around the problem?
It's all of it, you know, because you can't. And sometimes it's a hammer on from nowhere. You know, it depends on. The thing is, my dad strategically placed some notes in certain phrases just to make it fucked up and hard. You know, so it's hard on any instrument where a lot of these things fall. Like he'll do a repeated note at the exact wrong time, but it sounds amazing. But playing it is really awkward. So if you've got a repeated note, sometimes I'll put the same note on two different strings, so I just have a downstroke. You know, so it becomes a unison on two different strings, either direction. But you have to know where those are to make that work. And sometimes you can do it even with a hammer on, just so that it allows you to continue the phrase and then move your pick to where you need to get it to for the next thing that you need to do, especially if you have like nested tuplets or weird things that exist in my dad's music where you suddenly have to cram a bunch of notes in a short period of time. And they also have to have specific phrasing. So like if you have two groups of 5 that are, you know, a group of 2, then a 3, so it's da 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 da. You know, there's different ways that he might group those notes, or in an intervallic way where it's not on one string, it has to be on multiple strings to get to the notes. And so then you have picking problems where you have to either have a downstroke, a hammer on, move the pick, and then have an up to the next part, you know. So there's all these creative little things that you have to look for in the fingering of how to do it. And a lot of times you find multiple ways you could do something, but which one is going to be the best for that particular application? And that's it does tend to then work into your own playing in terms of phrasing. So for example, if I had a group of 5, I could play it on one string. Like I could play, you know, something where it's 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3. But I might do a position shift so I could keep track. So let's say it was 1, 2, and then I shift 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So da 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 da. Right. That way, I always know where the 2 is. You know, and that starts to become part of how I will visualize something, to make sure that if I have a phrase that has odd groupings in it, and I know I have to subdivide it with a 2 and a 3, or a 3 and a 2, or whatever, a 5 and a 4, I have to position shift them so that I know where they exist and in their own little spaces.
Yeah. I've just understood what you are creating a visual way of understanding the rhythm breakups. Right. That's mad. I would never have considered that. But I suppose you are continually finding a way of unlocking your dad's music and finding a solution for the puzzles.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, but it helps because you can do all kinds of things that way, that when you then start using it as part of your own phrasing in your soloing or even in your songwriting, you're able to do things that sound more complicated than they are, and they're actually easy to execute because you know how you're connecting these little fragments. Yeah. Whereas if somebody else was like trying to play it and they didn't see how you were doing it, like I have a lot of stuff I do where if you listen to it, you can't understand how these notes are coming from where they're coming from, you know. But if you see it, how I'm physically doing it, it looks like I'm not doing anything, because I will have a lot of stuff that will be like, let's say it's a group of 5 again. I might have something where I would start on a downstroke, a pull off, and then I would use an enclosure of 3 notes, one on each of 3 strings.
Yeah.
And I would just go up, up, up. So I would go down, pull off, up, 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 and then I'd move to another spot. So you get da 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 da. But I can have notes that sound like they're not in a scale; they're intervallically jumping out as part of a chord shape. But if you look at it, I'm playing chord fragments with a little melodic piece attached, and then it's all about the weird picking. So, but when you listen to it, it sounds like a cascade of notes that are coming from all over the place.
That's amazing. This is such an interesting insight into the person that has to survive this onslaught of crazy music and find a way of playing it, you know.
Yeah.
Listen, dude, I know it's the morning for you, and I'm conscious of taking up a lot of your time, but could you tell me about your Shabbat guitar?
Sure. It's a guitar that came from, I had played some of Avi Shabbat's guitars because he was friends with my front of house sound engineer. So he brought some guitars to a show, and they were all like traditional Strat style guitars. And I play an SG quite a bit, but I do love Strats. That's what I started on, you know, Van Halen style Strat, super Strat stuff. But his guitars just had a worn in feel to them that was different than a regular Fender. The scale length also felt like it was somewhere in between Fender and Gibson. So it just felt more comfortable to me. And at some point, he said, "Hey, I built you a guitar." And I love the guitar that he built. And I said, you know, if we did something like this, but we changed a few things on it, this is a guitar that I probably would play all the time. And then he said, well, why don't we do a signature model guitar? And so it just became that thing, which is funny because, you know, it's a small company. I like being able to work with small companies that just focus on the craftsmanship of what they do. And that could be the same with like amplifiers or other stuff too. I like supporting companies that have a vision of doing something, and they just said, you know what, I don't see anybody else doing this, so I'm going to do it this way. And even if it stays in that smaller realm, they're still doing high quality work. And that's what I like. You know, I like to support companies that have that kind of vision and stuff. So that's why I did this guitar with Avi. But it's funny because, you know, you have people that don't like guitars that have the relic look to them, but it's like, okay, well then order it where it doesn't look beat up. But for me, I like it to look beat up because I would never play a guitar and make it look that way.
Yeah.
But I do have a guitar that's beat up already. I tend to be more aggressive with it and more adventurous with it. So it's a psychological thing. But I know a lot of people are like, oh no, the guitar has to earn its stripes. It's like, I'm never going to drag it across the road, you know, and like, I don't do that stuff when I'm playing, but if it already is there and I get a feeling from it, that's what I like. So it doesn't matter if somebody complains that the guitar looks like it's, you know, improperly worn in. It's like, whatever, just order one that's not like that. You know, it doesn't matter to me.
No one's forced to buy anything, are they? That's the thing.
No.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's weird because you and I have been thrown into the digital world of social media.
Yeah.
You know, MySpace from MeetSpace. And immediately you would have been thrown under, you know, surveillance by the planet of guitar players and musicians and anyone that follows your father. And it must have been an interesting, you know, move.
Well, I never think about any of that stuff. You know, I just do what I do. And, you know, if people like what I do, that's great. If they don't, it doesn't bother me because, you know, you only have so many spins around the sun. And so just do what you like. And if other people like it, that's a bonus. But you got to find a way to just do the things that you enjoy and find a way to keep the lights on. And, you know, that's basically how I look at it. There's plenty of people that will make negative comments about stuff. But even if I do read it, I kind of laugh at it because it's like, it doesn't matter. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. So, you can have your opinions, but whatever, it doesn't matter.
I think that's really good advice, because I obviously I get a lot of musicians messaging me on YouTube or Instagram saying, hey, I'm starting out, I'm in a band. People online say I suck, or I'm finding it difficult because all the guitar players on YouTube just seem to be amazing, and I think, I don't think I'm good enough, and I feel like it's, in some ways, it's much easier to learn now because the resource is right there. I mean, you can literally get a lesson from Dweezil Zappa on YouTube, but then at the same time, new people are under the scrutiny of a million people. What advice have you got for musicians trying to be a guitar player in 2025?
I think really the thing is you have to just enjoy what you're doing. And if you are doing it because it's a creative pursuit that you would want to do, regardless of if you made money doing it, then that's going to be something that rings true, not only for you, but the people that pay attention to what you're doing. If there's an authenticity to what you're doing, and there's a joy in what you're doing, I think it's an attractive quality that an audience will want to pick up on. But if it's just because it's following a trend or whatever, you might get lucky and hit the trend at the right time or whatever it is. But a lot of people will probably not be that interested because it's just not, it doesn't say who you are and what you're doing. And so a lot of people will say, yeah, but you only play other people's music. You play your dad's music, or you play Van Halen, or you play this. And, they don't know that I've made records. They don't seek the stuff out. They just see what is on the surface of might be the most popular thing. But even having said that, the majority of musicians play other people's music. They're usually joining a band, or they're in an orchestra, or they're doing some project where they're playing music they didn't write, because it's music that people are familiar with. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's just, you have to enjoy it and not care what people think, and just do the thing that you like.
I think that's what comes across in your music probably the most, is that you just fucking love it. You are loving playing guitar, creating tunes, even the recording process. You seem to just, it's like a world that you really enjoy being in, studio and wiring up weird stuff. And
for sure,
I think from having been a fan of your music for such a long time, it's that I've almost loved the most, is the sort of imperceivable feeling of how much you are loving doing what you are doing at the time.
It's kind of the thing of like, you hear it in other examples in the world, it's like, it's the journey, not the destination, so it's learning things or having, surprises that just jump out in the moment. Anything that can be a surprise is super fun. I like all that stuff, but I'm also one of these people that, I'm not bothered by having to change direction or try something different. It's like, it's just all a learning process. So I like I like building new skills. I like pursuing different things, so like if I had food at a restaurant that I really like, I wouldn't mind trying to recreate it, working in the kitchen 10, 12, 15 times till I got it to where it's like, I like this better than what I had at that restaurant or whatever. Yeah. To me, that's just all fun stuff to do. But, some people, I guess, get paralyzed by too many decisions and they can't choose a direction or whatever. I think you just have to dive in and do stuff, and the stuff that you like, you'll get better at it and keep doing. But also it's good to be, if you can, work with people that are better than you at what you do, and then you learn more stuff.
Dude, by default, that's been every band member I've ever had. I've just struggled and clawed my way trying to sound good with drummers that understood everything that I had no idea about, and guitar players that had everything I didn't have. It's the best thing about being in a band, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, but I think it's just the same in life too. It's like you benefit from exposure to excellence in whatever field it is. It's like, and there's a relative scale for all of that stuff. But I think that as long as you have the ability to keep learning and not have a dumb ego about it, that's another thing. Is like when you're working with people. Like people ask all the time, well, how do you choose the musicians in your band? Like sometimes there's musicians that can play very well, but you don't want to hang out with them. I'd rather have somebody that has a great personality that maybe can't play the stuff yet, but I can see that they could play it. I'd work with that person much sooner than somebody that can already play it, but is a douche. So
that's the wisdom of the road, isn't it? Because it's when you're in a van for a month and you soon realize that you chose the wrong person, that these lessons are learned so hard, I think. Yeah.
Well, because it affects everything. If somebody's mood is going to affect other people's mood, and then it's going to affect the music, nobody wins in that situation, because an audience that's spending hard-earned money to come see you do something, they want to escape from the douchebags that are in their life. They want an evening of fun or excitement or whatever it is. So you do your best to present that, but you don't want to have attitudes and dumb stuff happening within the band on stage for the audience that's paid money to come see it. It should be like that. It's a joyful experience when you're doing it.
Well, I came to see you a bunch of times, and it was always like you could tell that you're all having fun on stage. Yeah. And I really like that. I'm not, I don't know if you've ever seen my videos. I'm not a sensible person. I don't take myself very seriously. I take my music seriously, but I don't take myself very seriously.
Well, and that's the right way. I think it's the same way with, me, my dad. He had a great sense of humor. He took his music very seriously, but he didn't have an ego about stuff. People thought of him as being this imposing figure, but he was imposing in the sense that he wanted somebody to play the music well because he's paying them to do a job. But, when somebody says, there's like an interview where somebody asked him, how would you like to be remembered? He said, I wouldn't. So he's not a guy that's thinking about legacy or check me out, look at all the cool shit that I've done. He just did it because he liked doing it. If other people liked it, it was a bonus. That's how I grew up with this stuff, So it's like I don't look at anything and be like, oh wow, look at all these things that I've accomplished. It's like once I've done something, I've moved on. I'm like doing the next thing. Like I don't care about the other stuff.
Yeah, I can see that in your output because it's prolific, and an interesting journey arc from where I first got into what you do to now, to see how much you've put out. I mean, it's mad. I don't know how you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I've been through and done, and and I still enjoy the creative process. That to me, that's the most fun part of the whole thing. Is just like a blank page and like, okay, well, what are we gonna do now?
Yeah. Listen, man, I'm gonna end it. It's been an hour and 20 minutes of just joy, to be honest with you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for
having me.
We'll
do the podcast ending, and then I'll talk to you for 5 minutes afterwards.
Sure. Sure thing.
Thank you very much, Dweezil. Have a great day.
Thank you.